The rain fell over Chicago like a punishment from the sky. Heavy drops crashed against the windows of the small apartment on the third floor of an old building in the South Side. Inside, the lights were off, and the only sound was the breathing of a woman lying motionless on a worn mattress. Her name was Elena Vance, and she had been pretending to sleep for exactly 47 nights. Her eyes were closed, but her ears captured every noise: the creak of the wooden floor, the distant sirens, the footsteps in the hallway that never belonged to anyone who wished her well. She was 32 years old, and she had learned that survival meant becoming invisible. Every night she would lie down, control her breathing, and wait. Wait for the door to remain closed. Wait for another sunrise. Wait for the nightmare that had become her life to somehow end. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, the footsteps stopped right outside her door. Eleanor felt her heart race, but she kept her body perfectly still. She had practiced this so many times that her muscles knew the script by heart. Do not move, do not breathe too fast, do not give any sign of life. The handle turned slowly, and a shaft of light from the hallway cut through the darkness of her room. She could hear voices now, low and urgent, speaking in tones that suggested authority and danger. These were not the usual sounds of her building, not the drunk neighbors or the couple who argued every Thursday. These voices belonged to men who commanded rooms simply by entering them. She felt a presence move closer, and the floorboards groaned under the weight of expensive shoes. Someone whispered, and then the room flooded with light. Eleanor kept her eyes shut, but she could feel the heat of the lamp against her eyelids. Her breathing remained steady, in and out, the rhythm of a woman who had trained herself to disappear while lying in plain sight. A deep voice cut through the silence. "Check under the bed." Her blood turned to ice. In that moment, every carefully constructed wall of protection she had built came crashing down. Because under that bed, hidden in a space she had carved out of the wooden frame, was the only thing in this world she was willing to die for. Footsteps approached the mattress, and she heard someone kneel down. The sound of hands brushing against the floor was followed by a gasp that seemed to freeze time itself. "Boss, you need to see this." Eleanor could no longer pretend. Her eyes flew open, and she found herself staring directly into the face of Dominic Marchetti, the man whose name was spoken in whispers throughout the city. His grey eyes were locked on hers, with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that cost more than everything she owned combined, and his expression was unreadable. But what she noticed most was the way his jaw tightened when he looked past her, toward the floor, toward the secret she had guarded with her life. She scrambled to the edge of the bed, her body moving on pure instinct, her arms reaching toward the space beneath the mattress. But before she could get there, one of his men had already pulled it out. Not an object, not contraband, not evidence of any crime. A child, a little girl, no more than 5 years old, with tangled brown hair and eyes too large for her thin face. She was clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, and she was trembling so hard that the toy shook in her tiny hands. She did not cry. She did not speak. She simply stared at the men surrounding her with the hollow gaze of someone who had learned too young that the world was not safe. Elena threw herself between the child and the men, her back pressed against the small body, her arms spread wide as if she could shield her from an army. "Please," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the word. "Please, she has nothing to do with this. Whatever you want, I will give it to you. Whatever you need, I will do it. But please do not touch her." Dominic Marchetti did not move. His eyes traveled from Elena's face to the child behind her, and something shifted in his expression. It was subtle, barely more than a flicker, but Elena caught it. She had spent years learning to read the faces of dangerous men, and she recognized what she saw. It was not cruelty, it was curiosity. He raised his hand, and his men stepped back immediately. "Who is she?" he asked, and his voice was quieter than she expected. Elena swallowed hard. "My daughter." "And why is she hiding under your bed at 2 in the morning?" The question hung in the air, and Eleanor felt the weight of every decision she had ever made pressing down on her chest. She could lie, She could make up a story about a game, about a child's imagination, about anything that might make this seem normal. But she looked at this man, at the power radiating from his stillness, and she knew that lies would not save her tonight. Because there are people looking for her, she said, and if they find her, they will take her away from me forever. Dominic's expression did not change, but she saw him process the information, filing it away in whatever mental archive governed his empire. Who are these people? Elena hesitated. The truth was dangerous, but silence, she realized, might be even more so. Her father, she finally said, or the man who claims to be her father. He works for someone powerful, someone with connections to the courts, to the police, to everyone who should have protected us. He lost custody 2 years ago because of what he did to me. But the ruling was overturned 6 months ago by a judge who owed him favors. Now he has legal rights to take her, and I have nothing but a restraining order that no one enforces. She paused, and her voice dropped to a whisper. So every night I pretend to sleep, and every night she hides under the bed. Because if anyone comes for her, I need those extra seconds. Those few moments to grab her and run, or to fight, or to do whatever it takes to keep her safe. The room was completely silent. Elena could feel her daughter's small hand gripping the back of her shirt, the tiny fingers holding on as if letting go meant falling into an abyss. Dominic Marchetti studied her for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his words were measured and precise. The man you are describing, his name is Vincent Moreno. It was not a question. Elena felt her stomach drop. You know him. He works for a competitor of mine, someone who has been causing problems in territories that do not belong to him. Vincent is his enforcer, his fixer, the man who makes problems disappear. He paused. I came here tonight because this building is connected to their operation. We were looking for evidence, for leverage, for anything that might give us an advantage. I did not expect to find a woman and a child hiding from the same monster. Elena did not know what to say. The collision of her world and his seemed too enormous to comprehend, too coincidental to be real. But the look in his eyes told her that this was not coincidence. This was fate wearing the mask of chance. What are you going to do? She asked. Dominic did not answer immediately. Instead, he crouched down until his eyes were level with the little girl still hiding behind her mother. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he understood that sudden gestures would only increase her fear. What is your name? He asked, gently. The child did not respond. She pressed closer to Elena, her face buried against her mother's back. Her name is Sophie, Elena said. She does not speak much anymore, not since everything started. Dominic nodded, and there was something in his expression that looked almost like understanding. Sophie, he said softly, I am not going to hurt you or your mother. I know that you have heard those words before and they meant nothing. I know that adults have made promises they did not keep. But I need you to listen very carefully. The man who scares you, the man who made you hide under your bed, he will never touch you again. Do you understand? Sophie's grip on Elena's shirt loosened slightly, and for the first time, she raised her head to look at the stranger kneeling before her. Do you promise? She whispered, and her voice was so small that it barely carried across the room. Dominic met her gaze without flinching. I promise. He stood up and turned to Elena, his demeanor shifting back to the commanding presence that had filled the room when he arrived. You cannot stay here, he said. If Vincent knows about this place, it is only a matter of time before he comes for her. And next time, there will not be anyone here to stop him. I do not have anywhere else to go, Elena admitted. My family is gone. My friends stopped answering my calls when they learned who her father was connected to. I have been surviving on the margins of this city for 2 years, and I have run out of places to hide. Dominic was silent for a moment, and then he made a decision that would change everything. Then you will come with me. Elena blinked. What? I have a property outside the city. It is secure, protected by men who are loyal only to me. No one enters without permission. No one leaves without being seen. If you stay there, Vincent Moreno cannot reach you or your daughter. Why would you do this? Elena asked, and the suspicion in her voice was impossible to hide. You do not know me. You have no reason to help us. What do you want in return?" Dominic's jaw tightened, and for a moment, something dark flickered behind his eyes. "I told you that Vincent works for my competitor, a man named Carlo Ferretti. He has been expanding into my territories for months, using violence and intimidation to take what is not his. Vincent is his weapon, and Vincent has become personal." "What do you mean?" 6 months ago, Vincent killed someone who mattered to me. Someone I could not protect. Someone I failed. The words hung in the air, heavy with grief that his stoic expression could not fully conceal. "I do not expect you to trust me," he continued. "I do not expect you to believe that my intentions are good. But I am offering you a choice. You can stay here in this apartment, pretending to sleep every night while your daughter hides under the bed. Or you can come with me, and let me give you the safety that I could not give to the person I lost." Elena looked at Sophie, at the fear still lingering in her daughter's eyes, at the stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest like a shield against a world that had shown her only cruelty. She thought about the 47 nights of pretending, the 47 nights of listening for footsteps, of holding her breath, of preparing herself for the moment when running would become the only option. She thought about how tired she was, how exhausted, how desperately she wanted to close her eyes and actually sleep, knowing that when she opened them, her daughter would still be there. "Okay," she said finally, "we will come with you." Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. If you love stories that touch the heart and remind you what it means to protect the ones you love, then this is the place you belong. Subscribe now, so you never miss the next chapter of stories like this one. The drive out of Chicago took nearly 2 hours. Elena sat in the back of a black SUV with tinted windows. Sophie curled against her side with the stuffed rabbit pressed to her cheek. The child had fallen asleep almost immediately, her small body finally surrendering to exhaustion now that she was no longer hiding in the darkness under a bed. Elena watched her daughter breathe, watched the slight rise and fall of her chest, and felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. It was fragile and uncertain, barely more than a whisper in the chaos of her mind, but it was there. For the first time in 2 years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that did not involve running. The SUV turned onto a private road lined with ancient oak trees, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the stars. Elena could see nothing but darkness beyond the headlights, and then slowly, a structure began to emerge from the shadows. It was not a house, it was an estate. A sprawling mansion of stone and glass that seemed to rise from the earth like something out of a dream. Lights glowed warmly from dozens of windows, and the grounds surrounding the building were immaculate. Manicured lawns giving way to gardens that even in the darkness suggested wealth beyond imagination. The SUV stopped in front of the main entrance, and Dominic stepped out first. He opened the door for Elena and waited as she carefully lifted Sophie, trying not to wake her. "This is your home?" Elena asked, unable to hide her astonishment. "One of them," Dominic replied. "This is the safest. No one knows it. Exists except for the people I trust with my life." He led her inside, through a grand foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that scattered light like captured stars. The interior was elegant, but not cold, filled with artwork and furniture that suggested taste rather than ostentation. Everything about this place spoke of power carefully wielded, of wealth accumulated through means Elena did not want to examine too closely. A woman appeared from a side hallway, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her face kind despite the lateness of the hour. "This is Margaret," Dominic said. "She has been with my family for 30 years. She will show you to your rooms and make sure you have everything you need." Margaret smiled at Elena and then looked at Sophie, still sleeping in her mother's arms. "Poor dear," she murmured. "She looks exhausted. Come, let me take you somewhere comfortable." Elena hesitated, glancing back at Dominic. "We will talk tomorrow," he said. "Tonight, you rest. You are safe here. I give you my word." And somehow, against every instinct that had kept her alive for the past 2 years, Elena believed him. Margaret led her up a sweeping staircase to the second floor, where a suite of rooms had been prepared. There was a bedroom with a large bed covered in soft linens, a smaller adjoining room with a child's bed already made up, and a bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown her worries in warm water. Everything was perfect, thought through, as if someone had anticipated exactly what a frightened mother and child would need. Eleanor laid Sophie on the small bed and tucked the blanket around her shoulders. The little girl stirred, but did not wake, her fingers still wrapped around the stuffed rabbit. "Sleep well, my love," Elena whispered. "No more hiding tonight." She stood there for a long time, watching her daughter rest, listening to the silence of a house where no footsteps threatened, no voices demanded, no danger lurked outside the door. And then, for the first time in 47 nights, Elena lay down on her own bed, closed her eyes, and allowed herself to truly sleep. The next morning arrived with sunlight streaming through curtains Elena did not remember closing. She woke slowly, disoriented, her body still expecting the cramped mattress and the constant alertness of her old apartment, but the bed beneath her was soft, the room was warm, and when she turned her head, she could see Sophie sitting up in the adjoining room, her eyes wide with wonder as she looked around at surroundings that must have seemed like a palace to a child who had known only hiding. "Mama," Sophie said, and her voice was clearer than Eleanor had heard it in months. "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe, sweetheart. Somewhere where we do not have to be afraid anymore." Sophie considered this for a moment, her small forehead creasing in concentration. "Do bad people know we are here?" "No," Elena said firmly. "No one knows we are here except for people who want to help us." The child nodded slowly, and then she asked a question that made Elena's heart clench. "Can I sleep in a real bed tonight? Not under yours?" Elena crossed the room and knelt beside her daughter, pulling her into an embrace that she wished could communicate everything she felt. The guilt for what Sophie had endured, the determination to make things better, the overwhelming love that had kept her fighting when giving up, would have been so much easier. "You can sleep in your own bed every single night from now on," she promised. "No more hiding, no more pretending, I promise." A knock at the door interrupted them, and Margaret entered with a tray of breakfast. Fresh fruit, warm pastries, orange juice, and milk. She set it on a small table by the window and smiled at Sophie. "Good morning, little one. I thought you might be hungry after your long journey." Sophie stared at the food with an expression of pure amazement. In the life they had been living, breakfast was often whatever Elena could afford from the corner store, eaten quickly and quietly before the day's fear began. "All of this is for us?" Sophie whispered. "All of it," Margaret confirmed. "And if you want more, you only have to ask." While Sophie ate with the enthusiasm of a child who had been denied simple pleasures for too long, Margaret turned to Elena with a more serious expression. "Mr. Marchetti would like to speak with you when you are ready. He is in his study on the first floor. I can stay with Sophie if you would like." Eleanor hesitated. Leaving Sophie with a stranger went against every protective instinct she had developed over the past 2 years. But something in Margaret's eyes reminded her of her own mother, who had passed away before any of this nightmare began. There was kindness there, genuine and uncomplicated, and Elena realized that if she was going to survive in this new world, she would have to learn to trust again. "I will be back soon," she told Sophie. "Stay with Margaret and finish your breakfast, okay?" Sophie nodded, her mouth full of pastry, her eyes brighter than Elena had seen them in months. Elena followed the hallway to the staircase and descended into the foyer she had barely registered the night before. In the daylight, the mansion revealed itself as even more impressive. Paintings lined the walls, original works that she recognized from art history classes she had taken in another lifetime. The furniture was antique, carefully maintained, and every surface gleamed with the attention of staff who clearly took pride in their work. She found the study without difficulty, its door slightly open. Inside, Dominic Marchetti sat behind a massive desk, papers spread before him, a phone pressed to his ear. He looked up when she entered and gestured for her to sit in one of the leather chairs facing him. "I understand," he said into the phone. "Keep me informed of any developments. And Marco, make sure this stays quiet. The last thing we need is unnecessary attention." He ended the call and set the phone aside, his full attention now focused on Elena. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Better than I have in almost 2 years," she admitted. "I had forgotten what it feels like to close my eyes without fear." Something flickered in his expression, something that might have been satisfaction or understanding. "Good. That is how it should be." He paused, leaning back in his chair. "I spoke with some of my contacts this morning. The situation with Vincent Moreno is more complicated than I initially believed." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "Vincent has been promoted within Carlo Ferretti's organization. He is no longer just an enforcer. He has been given authority over several operations in the city, which means he has more resources, more men, and more influence than he had when your custody case was decided. So he is even more dangerous now." "Yes, but danger works both ways." Dominic leaned forward, his grey eyes intense. "I have spent the last 6 months building a case against Carlo Ferretti, evidence of his operations, his connections to corrupt officials, his involvement in activities that would put him away for decades. Vincent is part of that case. If I can prove what he has done, not just to the person I lost, but to others like you, I can bring down their entire organization." Elena processed this information slowly. "You want to use me as a witness. I want to protect you while using what you know to destroy the men who hurt you. There is a difference." "Is there?" she asked, and the question carried the weight of every broken promise she had ever believed. Dominic did not look away from her challenge. "I am not a good man, Elena. I have done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. I have built an empire on foundations that polite society pretends do not exist. But there are lines I do not cross. Children are one of them. Women who cannot defend themselves are another. Vincent Moreno crossed both of those lines, and for that he will pay." Elena studied his face, searching for the deception she had learned to expect from men who spoke of protection. But all she found was a cold determination that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than strategy. "What exactly do you need from me?" she asked. "Your testimony, when the time comes. Documentation of what Vincent did, how the custody ruling was manipulated, who was involved in the corruption. Everything you know that can be verified and used. And in exchange, you and Sophie stay here under my protection until this is over. You will have everything you need: security, resources, legal representation. When Ferretti's organization falls, the custody ruling will be reversed. You will have your daughter back permanently, with no threat hanging over your heads." It sounded too good to be true. In Elena's experience, things that sounded too good to be true usually were. "What happens if you fail?" she asked. "What happens if Ferretti wins? If Vincent finds out where we are? If everything falls apart?" Dominic's expression hardened. "I do not fail. Not when it matters. Not anymore." There was something in his voice that made Elena believe him, despite everything she knew about the world and the men who controlled it. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the recognition of someone else who had lost something precious and was willing to burn everything down to prevent it from happening again. "Okay," she said, "I will help you. But I need you to understand something. Sophie is my entire world. Every decision I make, every risk I take, every breath I draw is for her. If at any point I feel that she is in danger because of this arrangement, I will take her and disappear. I have done it before. I can do it again." Dominic nodded slowly. "I would expect nothing less. A mother who would not fight for her child is not someone I would want on my side." They sat in silence for a moment, two people bound by circumstance and necessity, their worlds colliding in ways neither could have predicted. "There is one more thing," Dominic said. "Sophie. The way she hides, the way she does not speak, the fear in her eyes. She has experienced trauma that no child should know." Elena felt her throat tighten. "I know. I have tried to get her help, but every therapist, every counselor, every resource requires paperwork that would reveal our location. Vincent has people watching. He has access to systems that should be protected. The moment I try to get Sophie official help, he finds us. I have someone, Dominic said, a woman who specializes in helping children who have been through difficult circumstances. She is not connected to any official system, and she is completely trustworthy. She helped the children of several families I know, families who needed discretion as much as you do. If you are willing, I can arrange for her to visit Sophie, to assess what she needs and provide support. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. For 2 years, she had been carrying the weight of Sophie's pain alone, watching her daughter retreat into silence and fear, unable to do anything but hold her and promise that things would get better. The idea that someone could actually help, that Sophie might find her voice again, was almost too much to bear. "Yes," she whispered. "Please, I would be so grateful." Something softened in Dominic's expression, a crack in the armor he wore so carefully. "It will be arranged. Margaret will coordinate the details with you." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I know what it is like to watch someone you love suffer and feel powerless to stop it. I know the weight of that helplessness. You are not powerless anymore, Elena. Not here." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Go back to your daughter," he said. "Spend the day exploring the grounds, getting comfortable. There is a garden behind the main house that Sophie might enjoy, and there is a library on the east wing with books for children. Margaret can show you everything." Elena stood, and as she reached the door, she turned back. "Mr. Marchetti." "Dominic," he corrected. "If we are going to be allies in this, you should call me by my name." "Dominic." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Thank you. For last night, for this morning, for everything. I do not know why you are doing this, but I am grateful." He did not smile, but something in his eyes shifted. "Do not thank me yet. This is only the beginning." The days that followed settled into a routine that Elena would have found impossible to imagine just a week before. Mornings began with breakfast in a sunny kitchen, where Sophie ate pancakes shaped like animals and drank hot chocolate, while Margaret told her stories about the gardens and the animals that sometimes visited the estate. After breakfast, they would explore the grounds, walking through flower beds and past a small pond where ducks floated peacefully. Sophie discovered a swing hanging from an old oak tree, and she would spend hours there, pushing herself higher and higher while Elena watched from a nearby bench. In the afternoons, Elena met with Dominic and his team, reviewing documents, providing statements, answering questions about Vincent, about the custody hearing, about every detail she could remember of the nightmare she had escaped. It was exhausting, reliving those memories, pulling them into the light where they could be examined and catalogued, but it also felt like a purging, like each word she spoke was a step toward freedom. The child specialist arrived on the 4th day, a gentle woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who had kind eyes and a voice that immediately put Sophie at ease. She did not push or prod, did not ask difficult questions or expect Sophie to perform. She simply sat with her, colored pictures, played with dolls, and listened to whatever Sophie chose to share. After her first session, Sophie came out holding Dr. Chen's hand, and she looked at Eleanor with something new in her eyes. "I like her, Mama," she said. "She does not ask me to talk about the bad things. She just plays with me." Dr. Chen pulled Elena aside, while Margaret took Sophie to the kitchen for a snack. "She is a remarkable child," the doctor said, "resilient beyond her years. The trauma she has experienced is significant, but her attachment to you is strong and secure. That is her foundation, and it is solid. With time and consistent support, I believe she will heal." "How long will it take?" Elena asked. "Healing is not linear," Dr. Chen replied gently. "There will be good days and difficult days, but the fact that she is already opening up, even a little, is a very positive sign. The most important thing is that she feels safe. As long as that continues, she will continue to grow." Eleanor thought about the apartment they had left behind, about the bed Sophie had hidden under every night, about the fear that had become as constant as breathing. And she thought about this place, about the gardens and the swing and the pancakes shaped like animals. She feels safe here, Elena said. For the first time in 2 years, I think she actually feels safe. Then you have given her the greatest gift a mother can give, Dr. Chen said. The chance to be a child. Again. 2 weeks passed, and the estate began to feel less like a refuge and more like a home. Sophie's vocabulary expanded, her laughter became more frequent, and one morning, Eleanor found her playing with a young member of the security team, a man named Tony, who had apparently been coerced into a game of hide-and-seek. The sight of her daughter running through the halls, giggling as she searched for someone who was pretending not to see her, made Elena's heart expand in ways she had thought were no longer possible. But Elena knew that safety was temporary. The work with Dominic's team was progressing, but so were the threats from the outside world. Reports came in of Vincent's movements, of Carlo Ferretti's growing suspicion that someone was building a case against him, of corrupt officials scrambling to cover their tracks. The walls of the estate were strong, but they could not hold forever against the storm that was gathering. One evening, Eleanor found Dominic standing on the terrace behind the main house, looking out over the darkening grounds. The sun had set and the sky was painted in shades of purple and orange that reminded her of dreams she had stopped allowing herself to have. "May I join you?" she asked. He nodded without turning. She stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body, but not close enough to touch. "Sophie called you by your name today," she said. "She asked if Dominic would come to dinner." A flicker of something crossed his face, surprise perhaps, or pleasure. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I would ask. She said that would be acceptable." Elena smiled slightly. "She is developing quite the vocabulary. Dr. Chen says it is a sign of confidence." Dominic turned to look at her, and in the fading light his features were softer than she had seen them before. "She is a special child," he said. "There is a strength in her that reminds me of someone I used to know." "The person you lost?" Elena asked, gently. The silence stretched between them, and for a moment she thought he would not answer. "My sister," he finally said. "Lucia. She was not involved in our business, refused to have anything to do with it. She wanted to live a normal life, with a normal career and normal friends and normal problems. She was a teacher at a school on the north side, 2nd grade. She loved it." Elena waited, sensing that there was more. "Vincent Moreno found her 8 months ago. Ferretti ordered it as a message to me, a reminder that no one I cared about was beyond his reach. Vincent—" Dominic's jaw tightened. "Vincent made sure I received the message." "I am so sorry," Eleanor whispered, and the words felt inadequate against the weight of his grief. She was 34 years old. She had just gotten engaged. She wanted to have children, to fill her house with laughter and games and all the things she had missed growing up in our family. He paused. "I was supposed to protect her. I had guards assigned to her, surveillance on her apartment, protocols in place for emergencies. But Vincent was patient. He waited for the one moment when she was vulnerable, the one gap in the protection I had built. And he took her from me." Elena did not know what to say. She understood loss, understood the hollow ache of having someone torn away, but she could not imagine the guilt that came with feeling responsible. "That is why you helped us," she said. "Sophie. When you saw her hiding under the bed, when you realized what Vincent had done to our lives, you saw a chance to do what you could not do for Lucia." Dominic met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the full depth of his pain. "I saw a child who deserved to feel safe," he said, "and a mother who was willing to die to give her that safety. I could not save Lucia, but maybe if I can stop Vincent, if I can bring down Ferretti, if I can make sure no other child has to hide under a bed because a monster is hunting them, then her death will not have been meaningless." Eleanor reached out and placed her hand on his arm. It was a small gesture, tentative, but she felt him still beneath her touch. "It was not meaningless," she said. "She was loved. She was cherished. She mattered to you, and the fact that you are fighting in her name means her memory lives on. That is not meaningless. That is everything." They stood there in the darkness, two people bound by loss and hope, their stories intertwining. in ways neither had expected, and when Dominic finally covered her hand with his own, Elena felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Connection. Right now, at this moment, I need you to do something. In the comments below, write the word connection. If this story has touched your heart, if you understand what it means to find someone who sees your pain and chooses to stay anyway, write that word and let me know that you are here, that you are watching, and that you believe in the power of two wounded souls finding each other in the darkness. The connection between Elena and Dominic deepened over the following weeks, growing from alliance into something more complex and indefinable. They shared dinners with Sophie, who had started calling him Dom with the casual affection of a child who trusted implicitly. They took walks in the garden after the little girl went to sleep, talking about their pasts, their fears, their hopes for a future that seemed impossibly distant and yet somehow closer with each passing day. Elena learned things about Dominic that surprised her. He read poetry in Italian, his mother's language, and sometimes she would find him in the library with a worn volume in his hands, his lips moving silently over words she could not understand. He made elaborate breakfasts on Sundays, filling the kitchen with the smell of fresh bread and coffee, claiming it was the only tradition from his childhood he had kept. He was patient with Sophie, in ways that Elena had not expected, teaching her to play chess, reading her stories before bed, carrying her on his shoulders when her legs got tired from walking. But she also saw the other side of him. The phone calls he took in private, his voice dropping into tones that sent chills down her spine. The meetings with men who arrived in armored vehicles and spoke in coded phrases. The nights when he disappeared for hours and returned with shadows in his eyes that told her not to ask questions. She understood that the man who made pancakes shaped like animals and read poetry in the library was the same man who controlled an empire built on things she could not allow herself to examine too closely. The contradiction should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel safe, because Dominic Marchetti was dangerous and he had pointed all of that danger in one direction, at the people who had hurt her and Sophie, at the monster who haunted their dreams. One night, nearly 6 weeks after their arrival, Elena woke to the sound of voices in the hallway outside her room. She moved quietly to the door and opened it a crack, listening to the urgent conversation happening just beyond. "We have confirmation," a man's voice said. "Ferretti knows about the investigation. He is moving to destroy evidence and eliminate anyone who might testify against him. Does he know about this location?" That was Dominic's voice, hard and controlled. "We do not believe so, but Vincent has been seen in the city asking questions, offering money for information. It is only a matter of time before he finds a lead. Then we accelerate the timeline. How long until we have enough to move?" "The prosecutor says 2 more weeks, maybe less if we can get the financial records from the offshore accounts." There was a pause, and when Dominic spoke again, his voice was like ice. "We do not have 2 weeks. If Vincent is actively searching, we might have days. I want additional security on the perimeter, 24 hours. No one approaches this property without being identified and cleared, and I want eyes on Vincent at all times. I need to know where he is every second until this is over." "Understood, boss." Footsteps retreated, and then there was silence. Elena pulled the door open wider and stepped into the hallway. Dominic turned to face her, and something in his expression told her he had known she was listening. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough. Vincent is looking for us." "He will not find you. I will not allow it." Elena walked toward him, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. "What happens in 2 weeks? The case will be ready. The prosecutor will file charges against Ferretti, Vincent, and everyone connected to their organization. The evidence is overwhelming. Multiple witness testimonies, financial records, documentation of corruption at every level. When it goes public, their empire will collapse. And then? And then you will be free. The custody ruling will be overturned. Vincent will be prosecuted for his crimes. You and Sophie will be able to live your lives without fear." Elena wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that the nightmare was almost over, that the future she had stopped imagining could actually become real. But she had learned too many times that hope was a luxury she could not afford. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked. "What if Vincent finds us before then? What if the case falls apart? What if Ferretti has more connections than you know? Dominic reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm against her skin. Then I will protect you myself. No matter what it takes, no matter what I have to do, I will not let him touch you or Sophie. I give you my word. She looked up at him, at the grey eyes that had seen so much darkness and yet still held the capacity for tenderness. I believe you, she said, and she realized that she meant it. He lifted his hand to her face, his fingers brushing her cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so powerful. When this is over, he said quietly, when Ferretti is gone and Vincent is paying for his crimes, I would like you to stay. Not because you need protection, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because in these weeks watching you fight for your daughter, watching you find the courage to trust again, I have felt something I thought I lost when Lucia died. What is that? Elena whispered. Hope. The word hung between them, fragile and precious. I'm not asking for anything, he continued. I know you have been through too much to make promises about the future, but I want you to know that there is a place for you here, for both of you, for as long as you want it. Elena did not answer with words. Instead, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his, softly, briefly, a promise of possibilities yet to be explored. When she pulled back, his eyes were bright with something she had never seen there before. We should get some sleep, she said. It sounds like the next few weeks are going to be difficult. They will be, he agreed, but we will face them together. She returned to her room, her heart beating faster than it had in years, her mind filled with thoughts of futures she had stopped allowing herself to dream about. And when she checked on Sophie before climbing back into bed, she found her daughter sleeping peacefully, no longer curled in a protective ball, no longer clutching her stuffed rabbit like a lifeline. Sophie was sprawled across the mattress, arms and legs flung wide, taking up space in the way of a child who finally felt secure in the world. Eleanor smiled and closed the door softly. For the first time in 2 years, she fell asleep, without fear. The acceleration came faster than anyone expected. 3 days after the conversation in the hallway, one of Dominic's contacts in the city made a discovery that changed everything. A former associate of Carlo Ferretti, desperate to save himself from prosecution, had agreed to turn over evidence that would eliminate the need for the 2-week timeline. Financial records, communications, photographs, everything needed to bring down the organization in a single devastating blow. But the informant was scared. He wanted to deliver the evidence in person, wanted guarantees of protection before he handed over materials that would make him a target for the rest of his life. And he insisted on meeting with Dominic himself, the only person he trusted to keep his word. Elena learned about the meeting the morning it was scheduled to happen. She found Dominic in his study, reviewing details with his most trusted men, and she stood in the doorway, listening to plans that sounded like preparations for war. "Are you sure this is not a trap?" one of the men asked. "Roberto has been with me for 15 years, Dominic replied. "He would not betray me, but I am not taking chances. We will have teams positioned at every exit. Surveillance on every approach. If anything looks wrong, we pull out immediately. And if it is legitimate, then we end this tonight. Ferretti will be in custody by morning, and Vincent Moreno will spend the rest of his life paying for what he has done." Eleanor stepped into the room and all eyes turned toward her. "I want to come with you," she said. Dominic's expression hardened. "Absolutely not. This is too dangerous. You will stay here with Sophie, under the protection of the guards I am leaving behind. I have lived with danger for 2 years. I have hidden, I have run, I have done everything except stand and face the people who destroyed my life. If this meeting leads to Vincent's capture, I want to be there. I want to see it happen. I need to know that it is real." "Elena, I am not asking for permission, Dominic. I am telling you what I need." She held his gaze without flinching. "You said we would face this together. Let me face it." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Dominic nodded slowly. "You will stay in the vehicle at all times. You will not engage with anyone or anything. If I tell you to leave, you leave immediately, without argument, without hesitation. Is that understood?" Yes. Then we leave in 1 hour. Eleanor went to Sophie's room to say goodbye, finding her daughter playing with Dr. Chen, who had come for her regular session. The little girl looked up with a bright smile, her stuffed rabbit forgotten on the floor beside a new toy that Margaret had given her. "Mama, Dr. Sarah is teaching me to draw butterflies." Elena knelt beside her and pulled her into a tight embrace. "That is wonderful, sweetheart. I have to go somewhere with Dominic for a little while, but I will be back tonight. Margaret and Dr. Sarah will take care of you while I am gone." Sophie pulled back, her face suddenly serious. "Will you be safe, Mama?" Elena cupped her daughter's cheek in her hand. "I will be safe. I promise. And when I come back, I will have good news. The best news. Can you be brave for me until then?" Sophie nodded solemnly. "I can be brave. That is my girl." Eleanor kissed her forehead and stood, exchanging a look with Dr. Chen that communicated everything words could not. Then she left the room, her heart torn between the pull of her daughter and the necessity of what lay ahead. The drive into the city took 90 minutes. Elena sat in the back of the SUV, watching the landscape shift from rural estates to suburban sprawl to the steel and glass towers of downtown Chicago. The sun was setting by the time they reached the meeting location, a warehouse in a district that seemed abandoned except for the occasional homeless person and the rats that scurried in the shadows. Dominic had brought 8 men, all of them armed, all of them positioned according to plans that had been made and refined over the course of the day. Elena stayed in the vehicle as instructed, watching through the tinted windows as Dominic approached the warehouse entrance with 2 guards flanking him. The wait felt eternal. Eleanor counted her breaths 1 in, 1 out, trying to keep her heart from racing out of control. She thought about Sophie, about the butterflies she was drawing with Dr. Chen, about the peaceful nights and the laughter that had filled the estate over the past weeks. She thought about Dominic's promise, about hope, about futures that were beginning to seem possible. And then everything went wrong. The first sign was the sound of vehicles approaching, engines roaring in the distance. Elena turned to look and saw black SUVs appearing from multiple directions, converging on the warehouse like predators closing in on prey. "We have company!" someone shouted into a radio. The doors of the incoming vehicles burst open, and men poured out, armed and advancing with military precision. Elena recognized the insignia on their jackets, the colors that Dominic had described to her in conversations about his enemies. Carlo, Ferretti's men. The night erupted into chaos. Elena heard shouts, heard the sounds of confrontation, heard Dominic's voice cutting through the noise with commands that his men scrambled to follow. She pressed herself against the seat, her hands trembling, her eyes fixed on the warehouse entrance where Dominic had disappeared. And then she saw him. Vincent Moreno. He was walking toward the warehouse with the confidence of a man who knew he had won. His face was illuminated by the lights of the vehicles, and even from this distance, Elena could see the cold smile that she remembered from her nightmares. Her body went rigid. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to disappear into the darkness where he could not find her. But she could not move. She could only watch as Vincent approached the building where Dominic and his men were fighting for their lives. She did not know how long the confrontation lasted. It felt like hours. It felt like seconds. The sounds blurred together, into a cacophony of violence that she could not separate or understand. And then suddenly there was silence. A figure emerged from the warehouse. Elena leaned forward, straining to see through the darkness. It was Dominic. He was walking toward the SUV, his suit torn, his face marked with signs of struggle, but his eyes bright with something that looked like victory. Behind him, his men were leading a figure in handcuffs. It took Elena a moment to recognize the man, to process what she was seeing. Vincent Moreno, captured, defeated, powerless. Dominic reached the SUV and opened the door, his breathing heavy, his expression fierce. "It is over," he said. "We got him. We got them all." Elena stared at him, at Vincent being pushed into a waiting vehicle, at the warehouse that had become the site of the end she had dreamed about for 2 years. "Is he really—" She could not finish the sentence. "He will never hurt you again. He will never come near Sophie again. I promised you, and I—" Keep my promises." Eleanor threw herself into his arms, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with the release of fear she had carried for so long. He held her tightly, his hand stroking her hair, his voice murmuring assurances she could barely hear over the pounding of her heart. "Let us go home," he said. "Your daughter is waiting for you." The drive back to the estate was quiet. Eleanor leaned against Dominic's shoulder, exhausted but unable to sleep. Her mind kept replaying the events of the night, kept circling back to the image of Vincent in handcuffs, kept testing the reality of freedom she had not allowed herself to believe in. When they arrived at the estate, the sky was beginning to lighten. Eleanor went directly to Sophie's room, easing the door open to find her daughter still sleeping, her small body peaceful, her face relaxed. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched her daughter breathe. In and out, in and out. The rhythm of a child who had no idea that the monster under the bed had finally been defeated. When Sophie woke hours later, Elena told her the news in the simplest terms she could find. "The bad man cannot hurt us anymore, sweetheart. He has been taken away by people who will make sure he never comes back." Sophie processed this information with the solemnity of a child who had learned too much about bad men. "Forever?" she asked. "Forever?" A smile spread across Sophie's face, transforming her features into something Eleanor had not seen in years. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "Can I sleep in my own bed tonight without hiding?" "Yes, my love. You can sleep wherever you want." "Can I have pancakes for breakfast?" Eleanor laughed, tears pricking at her eyes. "You can have whatever you want." Sophie threw her arms around her mother's neck, her small body warm and trusting. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in the world." The weeks following Vincent's capture passed like a dream. The case against Carlo Ferretti proceeded with devastating efficiency, the evidence overwhelming, the witnesses unstoppable. Within a month, the organization that had terrorized Elena's life was dismantled, its leaders facing charges that would keep them imprisoned for decades. The custody ruling was overturned without resistance. The judge who had been corrupted faced his own investigation, and the legal system that had failed Elena finally acknowledged its mistakes. Sophie was hers, permanently, completely, without fear of her ever being taken away. Life at the estate settled into a rhythm that Elena had never experienced before. Peace. Simple, uncomplicated peace. Sophie attended sessions with Dr. Chen twice a week, but they had become less about therapy and more about celebration. The little girl's vocabulary continued to expand. Her laughter filled the halls, and one afternoon, Eleanor found her teaching Tony, the security guard, how to draw butterflies. Eleanor and Dominic grew closer with each passing day. She learned to navigate the complexities of his world, to understand the choices he made and the lines he walked. She did not agree with everything, did not close her eyes to the shadows that lurked beneath the surface of his empire. But she saw, too, the man who read poetry and made pancakes, the man who had saved her daughter and kept every promise he had made. One evening, 3 months after Vincent's capture, Dominic asked Elena to walk with him in the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that seemed too beautiful to be real. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the oak tree where Sophie's swing hung motionless in the still air. "I have been thinking," Dominic said. "About what?" He turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes she had not seen before. Vulnerability. Hope. Fear. About the future. About what comes next. He paused, seeming to search for words. "I told you months ago that there was a place for you here. For you and Sophie. I meant it then, and I mean it now. But I find myself wanting more." Eleanor felt her heart quicken. "What do you mean?" Dominic reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. He did not kneel, did not make a dramatic gesture. He simply opened the box to reveal a ring that caught the fading light. "I love you, Elena. I love your courage and your determination and the way you have fought for Sophie with every breath you have taken. I love the way you challenge me and push me and refuse to accept anything less than what you deserve. I love the life we have started to build here, and I want to build more. I want to spend every morning making pancakes for Sophie and every evening watching the sunset with you. I want to grow old in this house, surrounded by the family we have created together. He took her hand and held it gently in his own. Will you marry me? Eleanor looked at the ring, at Dominic's face, at the garden that had become her sanctuary, at the house that had become her home. She thought about the 47 nights she had spent pretending to sleep, the fear, the exhaustion, the desperate hope that somehow, someday, things would be different. And she thought about how different things had become. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Dominic slid the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her, softly at first, then with an intensity that spoke of everything they had overcome and everything that lay ahead. When they finally broke apart, she saw Sophie. Watching from the doorway of the house, her face lit up with excitement. "Mama! Mama! Is that a ring? Are you getting married?" Elena laughed, wiping tears from her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. We are getting married." Sophie ran toward them, throwing herself into their embrace, her small body fitting perfectly between theirs. "Does this mean Dom is going to be my papa?" Dominic looked at Elena, then down at the child, who had captured his heart from the moment he found her hiding under a bed. "If you will have me," he said gently. Sophie nodded solemnly, then grinned. "I will have you, but you have to promise to make pancakes every Sunday." "I promise. And read me stories before bed." "I promise. And never let the bad man come back." Dominic's expression softened, and he placed his hand on Sophie's head with infinite tenderness. "I promise, Sophie. With everything I am, I promise." The wedding took place on a spring afternoon in the garden where Dominic had proposed. It was small and intimate, attended only by those who had become family. Margaret, Tony, Dr. Chen, and the handful of men who had been there from the beginning. Sophie served as flower girl, walking down the aisle with her stuffed rabbit in one hand and a basket of petals in the other. Elena wore a simple white dress that Margaret had helped her choose, and Dominic wore a suit that made him look every bit the powerful man he was, softened by the love in his eyes. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Sophie cheered louder than anyone, her voice carrying across the grounds like a song of celebration. The reception lasted until the stars came out. They danced and ate and laughed, and Elena found herself looking around at the life she had built, at the family she had found, at the future that stretched before her like an endless promise. Later that night, after Sophie had been tucked into bed with kisses and stories and a reminder that no one would ever make her hide again, Eleanor stood on the terrace where she had first spoken with Dominic about hope and loss and the possibility of starting over. He joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on the top of her head. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I was thinking about the night you found us, about how terrified I was, and how certain I was that everything was about to end. And now," Eleanor smiled, leaning back into his warmth, "now I know that it was not an ending, it was a beginning. The beginning of everything." They stood there together, watching the stars spread across the sky, listening to the peaceful silence of a world that had finally become safe. "I love you," Elena whispered. "I love you too," Dominic replied. "Now and always." And in a room down the hall, a little girl slept peacefully in her own bed, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. Her stuffed rabbit rested on the pillow beside her, and on her face was a smile that spoke of dreams filled with pancakes and butterflies and the absolute certainty of being loved. If you have watched this far, it is because this story touched your heart. Leave a comment saying, "I watched this far so I can get to know you," and see who really enjoys the stories here on the channel. Like this video if it made you feel something. Share it with someone who needs to believe that even in the darkest moments, hope can find us. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of courage, love, and the power of second chances. Thank you for being here, thank you for watching, and remember, no matter how dark the night, there is always a sunrise waiting. Until the next story.